Welcome to Learn Extra Business Studies. I'm Uwe Miller and I will be going through the November 2011 paper with you. I will start with the compulsory section, question 1. We are going to start with the multiple choice questions. It's always important to look at the question first and try and find the answer for that question first before you actually look at what the different possible answers could be. It's just going to make it so much easier, especially when you find possibly there are two of those four answers that are very similar. So always try and answer it yourself first. So let's immediately get into the paper and let's start with those multiple choice questions, and we'll start with the first one. Now if we look at that first question, 1.1, wholesalers in the tertiary sector usually have control over challenges in the microenvironment. So let's just analyze that question a little bit. So we are talking about challenges and the macro environment. Now remember, there are three environments: the micro, the market, and the macro. So in this question, they're referring to the macro. Now, if you can remember from your studies, the micro environment is the one where the business owner or management will have full control. Market, you have no control, but you can influence the challenges. In the macro, you have absolutely no control. These are things that are happening outside the business, and you cannot control those. So now that we've looked at the micro, the market, and the macro environments, and the extent of control that management or the owner will have, let's look at what the possible answers could be. So let's look at the question and the different possible answers. You can see, firstly, A, it mentions little control. B, some control. C, no control. And D, complete control. Now remember, we said macro, no control. You see, so by answering actually the question before we even look at what the possible answers could be, we now know the answer is C. Right? So C is our answer over there. Let's go down to the second one. A group of representatives made up of employees selected in an organization that employs more than 100 workers and which encourages joint problem solving between employer and employee. Right, so over here we've got, it's a type of business where the number of employees exceed 100, and it allows for joint decision making between the employer and the employees. Now, as we know, usually the workers will belong to a trade union. The workers will definitely elect someone in the workplace to be their representative, whichever trade union they prefer or select to actually join. So now let's look at what the possible answers are here. Firstly, shop stewards. Now shop stewards are the people we elect to represent us with the trade union. Second one, workplace forum. So if you look at the word forum, it immediately, automatically implies it's where discussions are going to take place between management and the workers. The next possible answer is staff meeting, and the last one is congregation. Now let's go back to the question and see exactly what it is that they want us to answer here. So it's a group. We select a different color. It's a group of representatives. A group of representatives made up of employees selected in their organization. There must be more than 100 workers, and it encourages joint problem solving. Now the answer here is B, which is workplace forum. Now if you go back to your notes, you go back to your study notes, and you go and you study conflict management, you will remember that a workplace forum is there for both the workers and management to engage on matters which involve the workers and management, and which would obviously be of concern to both parties. But you only have workplace forums where you have more than 100 workers. So that's why the forum is the workplace forum. The group of workers would be in the workplace forum. 1.3. The BBBEE Act. Right, now we know triple B, double A, that's your Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act. Right, let's read further. Targets several pillars for growth and development, and something is identified as one of those pillars. Now, with the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment, we actually have 7 pillars. Right? There are 7 pillars. The 2 main pillars are really to transfer ownership and management. Right? So it's there to get more black people into senior management positions, but also to transfer ownership to the majority of the population. Right, so now let's look at our possible answers. We've got the A, ownership, B, capital, C, quality of performance, and D, insurance. Now you can see insurance has got nothing to do with that. Quality of performance, possibly that could have something to do, because always in a business it's about quality of performance. Capital is the actual capital you would like to raise. Now, if you can remember, initially I mentioned that ownership and management are the 2 major pillars of the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act. So our answer over here should therefore be A, ownership. Let's go down to the next one, 1.4. An example of unprofessional and unethical behavior is which one of the following 4 possible answers? Now let's just look at those 2 concepts. Unprofessional, unethical. Now in the workplace we should always conduct ourselves, as we know, in a professional manner. Now depending on the type of job that you do and where you work, that could mean different things. Ethical would be more about moral values. So professional, more about how I conduct myself in the workplace and that which is expected of me as the worker. Ethical is more about our moral codes and values, also those of our culture and society that would have a bearing on how we are going to behave in the workplace, and also for businesses, how they are going to conduct themselves and how they are going to interact with the workers, with the customers and other stakeholders in the community, for example. Right, let's go back to the possible answers. Right, selling second-hand goods as new. Right, now if you are going to be selling something which is second-hand and you claim that it is new, that would be totally wrong. Right, so you can see unethical, it's wrong, it's right or wrong. This would be wrong because you are presenting something which is second-hand as being new. Let's look at the others quickly. So B, employing unskilled workers. Right, now that would not be a good idea, but it's definitely not unethical to do that, because you can always train the workers, you can always develop them. Increasing prices in line with competitors. There's nothing wrong with that. If your competitors are increasing their prices, probably because of cost, there's nothing wrong with you increasing your prices as well. Finding a substitute for the competitor's product, well, why not? because you are actually going to separate yourself from the competition. So if we look at those 4 possible answers, it's clear that our answer is going to be A, right? Because that is actually unethical. You're claiming something which is second-hand is new and you're presenting it as such. Right, let's go on to 1.5. Which one of the following is an expense for the business? So it means only one of those 4 is in fact an expense. Let's look at the first one there. Rent income. You can see income. I mean, that's not an expense. It's income. It's money coming into the business. Interest on a fixed deposit. So this could mean you are actually earning interest on money which you have invested. Interest on a loan. A loan would mean you have actually borrowed the money and now you have to repay the loan, plus you have to pay interest to the bank on the loan. And the last one, which is debentures. Now, debentures, when a public company borrows money from the public. Right? So debenture you're only going to get when a public company borrows money. So in that case, people like you and me, we could be investors and we could actually lend the money to the company. And the company would then have to pay us interest. Right, so we go back there and we look at the answer. It's going to be C. Right, so our answer here is going to be C because it's where the business has to pay interest on the loan. So that is definitely going to be an expense. Let's move on to 1.6. An induction program has to do with one of the following. Now, induction comes in with the HR program of the business. So it's the human resource management program. It's one of the steps in human resource management. So if you're the human resource manager, part of your job is going to be to introduce new workers to the workplace. So let's go and look at what the possible answers are. Firstly, we have training an employee to operate an existing machine. Now that's definitely part of the HR function. You are responsible for training the workers, but that doesn't mean it's part of induction. Welcoming new employees to the company and preparing them for new responsibilities and roles. C, manpower planning. Now, manpower planning would be where you actually do an audit and you look at how many workers you need and what type of workers you need. That is definitely going to help you with your recruitment. D, we're back with the broad-based black economic empowerment. Now, if we look at those 4, remember I mentioned initially induction is where you introduce new employees to the workplace. Now, bearing that in mind, let's look at the 4 again. So you can see that our answer should be B. Right, it's where you welcome the new employee to the company and prepare them for their new responsibility and roles. With induction, you are actually going to explain the policies, the procedures to the new worker. You're going to introduce them to their colleagues, and in a way you're taking that anxiety of starting in a new job away from them. So when they arrive to start on the first day working, they already know exactly what is going to be expected of them, and they have met some of their colleagues, so they are definitely going to be less tense and they're going to be a bit more at ease when starting with that new job. Right, let's look at the next one. 1.7. Sipho has recently received an amount of 2,000 Rand as a dividend from an investment with MTN. This investment was in the form of one of the following 4. Now, firstly, if we look at that investment, It's 2,000 Rand, and you've got the word dividend there. Now for a fixed deposit, we normally get interest. Right, when we go to a bank and we invest money in a fixed deposit, the bank is going to pay us interest on that deposit. Let's look at the next one. Bonds, like for example your retail bonds, you are going to get interest again. Fixed property. Normally when you buy fixed property, you are going to rent it out and you are going to get rent income from that. So that leaves us with C, shares. So that is our answer. Why is our answer shares? Is when the company, when they make a profit, they are going to issue a dividend. And that dividend will be our share of that profit. Right? So that's why the answer there is C. Let's look at the next one. 1.8. When an employer and employees cannot agree on demands for an increase in salary. Right? So they're negotiating and they cannot come to an agreement. Or it could be for better working conditions, for example. They can refer these matters to the following. Welfare court. No, that's the welfare court. I mean, that's got more to do with our personal lives, really. If we have problems outside of the workplace, for example. Lockout clause. Right, now lockout is when the employer decides to lock out the workers, and they actually need to get, they need to get permission, just like when the workers decide to go on strike. They can't simply go on strike, they need to serve notice on the employer. The employer would have to do this exactly the same with the workers if they intend to lock them out. Let's look at the next one. Workplace forum. Right, we've had that before. It's where you employ more than 100 workers, that the workers would be represented in the workplace forum. But we're looking at where we cannot agree on something. Where can we refer this to? Our last one here is the CCMA. Right, so the Council for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration. Right, so conciliation, mediation and arbitration. Now if you look at those words, mediation and arbitration, you can see this is an outside body where we can take our grievance to if we really cannot overcome whatever it is that we differ on. So both the employer and the workers cannot agree. The employer offers, for example, 7% increase and the workers want 12%. They've been negotiating, they cannot reach an agreement. Right? This can now be referred to this outside body, which is the CCMA. So our answer is going to be D, which is the CCMA. Right, next one, 1.9. This legislation, so we're looking at a law, ensures that qualified people from designated groups, so it's specific groups, have equal opportunities in the workplace. So it's some or other law which allows for specific groups to have equal opportunities in the workplace. Let's start with affirmative action. Affirmative action is in our Constitution. Because of the clause on affirmative action in the Constitution, the government also passed the Employment Equity Act. B. Unemployment Insurance Act. C. Industry Charter. And D. COIDA. Right, so now let's go through the other three, because I've already mentioned a little bit about affirmative action. Unemployment Insurance Act is one of the compulsory insurances where both the employer and the employee will contribute towards UIF. So that when or if you lose your job, at least for a period of time, you can go and draw on your unemployment, on the unemployment fund. Next one, industry charters. That's got to do with broad-based black economic empowerment. And the last one has got to do with Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. So you can see that's got nothing to do with equality. That's more with broad-based black economic empowerment. That is insurance. So our answer here is going to be A, right? Affirmative action. 1.10. Use a different color. Employees enjoy tax rebates when contributing towards this fund. So that means as a worker, if you contribute towards this fund, there is a tax relief for you. Rebate means it's almost like a discount you are going to get on your tax. So when you fill in your tax return, you are going to benefit from this from a tax point of view. Right, so let's look at the possible answers. A, we've got unemployment insurance again. Right, we know that's a compulsory insurance, so it's got nothing to do with the tax rebate. Lottery, right, we all know when we go and play the lottery, we all hope that we are going to win some money, but that's got nothing to do with claiming the tax rebate. Motor vehicle accident fund, that is another compulsory insurance, right? So we're looking at insurance here again. And then our last one, retirement annuity fund. Now that is our answer. So our answer here is D. Now that we've completed analyzing the multiple choice questions, let's take a short ad break. Welcome back from the ad break. We are now going to look at question 2. So now we're going to look at the next one. Choose the correct word or words from those given in brackets. As you can see with these 5, you are going to be given 2 words. And you must choose the correct one, the word that would actually make the sentence correct. Right, let's look at the first one. A SWOT analysis. Right, now remember SWOT, S stands for strengths, W for weaknesses, O for opportunities, and T for threats. Or a job analysis is a tool for auditing a business and its environment. Now, job analysis is basically about looking at the jobs that needs to be performed in a particular workplace, and then to work out what type of workers you are going to need and how many. Whereas a SWOT analysis is a tool to scan the environment, both internally and externally. So now let's go back and see which one is the correct one. So based on what I've explained to you now, you can see that the SWOT analysis, that should be our answer. Right, so that one over there. So the SWOT analysis, that is our answer. That's the tool for auditing a business and its environment. The second one, either the shareholders or the board of directors are responsible for the management, so that's the key word there, of public companies. Now with public companies, whether they are private or public, the shareholders will usually appoint people to manage the business for them. And those people who are going to manage the business for them are called directors. So the shareholders will in fact appoint a board of directors to manage the business on their behalf. So you can now see the answer is going to be board of directors. Right, so it's the board who is responsible for managing the company, not the shareholders. Our next one, the code of ethics. Right, we've had that before in one of the multiple choice, remember? We had the concepts of unprofessional and unethical. So we're back with that word ethics. So it's about moral codes or values. Go back to the question. Or instruction manual is a written document stating the principles, and you see there's that key word values, which the business or organization upholds. So we can see the answer over there is code of ethics. 2.4. You can see here you've got two pieces of legislation, the Labour Relations Act and the Skills Development Act. Now, Labour Relations Act is more like a framework within which labour relations are conducted. So in the Labour Relations Act, it will give us all the types of rules and regulations in which we have to conduct strikes or go-slows or lockouts, formation of trade unions, all those type of things. Whereas the Skills Development Act is more about developing the skills and the know-how of the workforce. Now let's go back to the question. So it's either one of those two laws makes provision for different SETAs to train. You see that word train? So to develop, to train the labour force. Therefore, and the SETAs are different bodies that we find within the different sectors of the economy, which will be responsible for training the workers in that sector. So all your teachers or your hospitality workers or your mine workers, etc., there will be a SETA representing them, and they will be responsible for the overall training of workers in that sector, and to make sure also that the training is up to standard, etc. Right, so we can see train, SETAs, so our answer must be the Skills Development Act. 2.5. A worker is not allowed to work overtime for more than 13 or 10 hours a week. Now, to be able to answer this question, you really need to know the basic conditions of Employment Act. And one of the aspects dealt with in the basic conditions of Employment Act would be your hours of work. And it states very clearly in the Act that workers are not allowed to work more than 10 hours. Right? So that's specific. It's a very specific answer. So the answer has to be 10 hours a week. Right, now you can see the next one is a match the column. Now, a tip that I can give you with match the column is always look at the statements or descriptors first. So almost try to answer it again like the multiple choice. Try and look if you know the answer without looking at what is going to match that particular statement or descriptor. Right, so let me do exactly that with you. Right, so now let's start with the word go slow strike. That indicates to me that the workers are going to slow the pace at which they're going to be doing the job. Second one, job description. The word description tells me that it describes the job that you need to do. Unsafe clause. That refers to some or other safe that must be very strong. Professionalism, we have had that before. That's the way in which you conduct yourself in the business. Mission, we know that businesses normally would have a vision, a mission, and goals. So that's got something to do with that. Okay, let's look at what the possible answers are. A helps to achieve the vision. So we can see that fits in with the mission. Okay, so 3.5, it looks like the answer there should be A, because the mission is going to help you to achieve your vision. Mix it. Well, that doesn't look like it's got anything to do with any of those that I have gone through now. Standards and behavior for a particular occupation. You will agree with me that that links up with professionalism. D, workers work at a slower pace. Remember, I mentioned that over there with the go slow. So the answer there looks like it should be D. E, stipulates that the books or stock records of the business should be kept in a fireproof safe. You see, so a strong safe that's going to keep the record safe. So that one links up over there. So that looks like E. So we've got D, we've answered that, we've answered C, we only have one left to answer. And if we look at F, describes the actual job requirements. Right? And remember over there, when I looked at job description, I said it describes the job that we have to do. So that goes up there, and we have answered our question. So 3.1D, 3.2F, 3.3E, 3.4C, 3.5A. Now that we've completed analyzing the multiple choice questions, let's take a short ad break. Let's get right into analyzing these case studies and scenarios, starting with question 4. Now, if you look at question 4, read the case study below and answer the questions that follow. JJ Taxis. John and Jim started a taxi service running from Soweto to the Johannesburg city centre. They borrowed money from a bank to buy 4 new taxis and named their business JJ Taxis. Many government departments made use of their services. We've got government departments making use of them. Their turnover for the past year was lower, so we had a drop in sales, than for the previous 5 years. The governor of the Reserve Bank announced an increase of 1% in the prime interest rate. So interest rates have gone up. Green Light Taxi Service, a new competitor, has just launched its business, and many government departments cancelled their bookings with JJ Taxis. So it appears that in this case study there are quite a few challenges facing the business. So let's look at what they want you to answer. 4.1, name the sector in which JJ Taxis operates. Now we know there are 3 sectors: the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary. The primary is where you extract materials, the secondary usually manufacturing, and the tertiary where you render a service. Now you can see in our case study it mentioned taxi service. So it's a service type of business, so therefore it would be the tertiary sector. Right, so that's a fairly straightforward question. Which sector of the economy do they operate in? Let's look at the next part of the question. Right, 4.2, identify any 2 challenges. From the case study, name the environment that each challenge belongs to, and also the extent to which JJ Taxis can control these environments. So in other words, there are really 3 things they want us to do. 2 challenges we have to identify, name the environment, and thirdly, the extent of control. Now, in the question, they actually gave you the way in which they want this question to be answered. They've given you challenges, environment, and the extent of control. So we merely need to identify 2 challenges, look at which environment it falls within, and the extent of control. So let's immediately go and do that. Go back to our case study. Right, the first one, remember they borrowed money from a bank. Why did they borrow the money? They wanted to buy 4 new taxis. That could be a challenge, because can they raise enough money? Can they get the necessary loan to be able to buy the 4 taxis? So if we look at the bank in itself, that would be an external factor. Will the bank actually grant them the loan? Let's look for something else. Government departments in the past used to make use of their services, so that's not a problem, that's a good thing. Second one, their turnover, remember, was lower, so that's definitely another challenge. Another one would be the increase in the interest rate. The new competitor would be another one. And the fact that the department's now cancelled. You see, there are about 4 or 5 different challenges that you could actually mention here. So let's take any 2 of those. So I'm going to take the 1% increase in the interest rate and the new competitor. Right? Let's take those 2. So we're going to say our first challenge is the increase in the interest rate by 1%. Right, now interest rates is in the external, it would be in the macro environment, because it's actually the governor of the Reserve Bank who announced the increase in the interest rate. So we're in the macro environment. So that's what we need to fill in there. And now what's the extent of control? Remember from the multiple choice, macro you have no control. So that's what we need to write there. No control. Let's go down to our second one. That was the new competitor. Right, now competition is an element in the market environment. So our environment here is going to be market. Now with the market environment we still have no control. We can influence, but there's no control. There's very limited control there. So we can say no control, but can influence. Right, so over here definitely you can maybe influence what your competitor does, because if you perhaps drop the prices that you're going to charge the commuters, the competitor may be forced to do the same, or you can copy what the competitor is doing, etc. But you cannot tell your competitor what to do. So you can't go and tell Green Light Taxi Service what they must charge their commuters. You're going to have to watch very closely what they do and make sure you take the necessary steps to counter what they've done. Okay, so we've answered that part where we looked at the 2 challenges, we've looked at the 2 environments, and we've answered the extent of control that you may or may not have. Question 5, we've got another little scenario here. Study the advertisement below and answer the questions that follow. You can see here, tax advisor, Limpopo. So it appears as if some other place in Limpopo is looking for a tax advisor. Let's look at the ad. Career enrichment and job fulfillment for qualified tax professionals. The company does not discriminate on the basis of gender, race, or religion, and supports inclusivity. This indicates to me that this is definitely a company that would support affirmative action, and that this company is going to comply with the Employment Equity Act. So let's write that there. Employment Equity Act. The position includes the following areas of responsibility. So anybody reading this ad can now see exactly what they are going to be responsible for. Firstly, you're going to have to manage and develop a team of tax advisors. So you're going to be in charge of these other tax advisors. Secondly, You're also going to be responsible for investment and financial planning. So that's what you're going to have to be able to do if the job was offered to you. What are the requirements? The following requirements must be met by the candidates. Firstly, you need to have a BCom degree. Secondly, you need to have a certificate in financial planning. Thirdly, suitable management experience of at least 1 year in the financial services industry. And then lastly, they mention remuneration will depend on the level of experience and ability of the candidate. They do mention that it is a market-related salary or remuneration. Right, let's look at the questions. The first one, state 3 factors. So 3 factors that the tax advisor will consider when applying for the job. So now if it's you reading this ad and you would like to apply for the job as a tax advisor, what would be the things that would be going through your mind? And what is it that you would have to take into consideration before you actually apply for the job? Right, we can quickly go back and let's see what we've got in the ad. Clearly you're going to have to look at what's going to be required. Right, so the areas of responsibility. Do I feel comfortable to be leading a team of other, for example, tax advisors? Secondly, you need to look at, do you actually meet these requirements? Do you have a BCom degree? Do you have a certificate in financial planning? And do you at least have 1 year suitable experience? You're definitely going to have to consider those things before you actually apply for the job. So we could mention those there in the answer. So we've got to look at the degree. That's definitely one thing, or your qualifications. Your experience. You must have at least, remember, 1 year experience. And you also need to look at that certificate. You need that certificate in financial planning as well. Apart from that, you're also going to have to look at some general things. Are you going to have to relocate? Maybe you don't live in Limpopo. And now if you were offered the job, you're going to have to move to Limpopo. So you do definitely need to consider that. Are you prepared to relocate to Limpopo, for example? You're definitely going to have to consider the remuneration, especially if you're going to have to relocate. That will be another very important factor to consider. Right, so we've covered about 5 factors there. We're going to need 3. So you're going to have to look at relocating and the remuneration. Right, so that would give you 5, and you need to give 3 answers there. 5.2. Does this vacancy comply with the Employment Equity Act? Motivate your answer. Now it's very important when you get a question like this where they ask you for your opinion that you don't simply write yes or no. If you're going to write yes, you need to substantiate or motivate why you say yes. Or if you disagree and you want to say no, then you also need to be able to say, well, why you don't think it complies with the Employment Equity Act. Let's go back and look at the ad. Remember, I even made a note there, Employment Equity Act, because it states there right in this very first paragraph, the company does not discriminate on the basis of gender, race or religion and supports inclusivity. So it definitely meets the requirements of the Employment Equity Act. So we can go back to the question and we can definitely say yes, right? That it definitely complies with the requirements of the Employment Equity Act, and you can refer to the advertisement where it stipulates clearly that they don't discriminate on the basis of race or gender, and that they take very seriously inclusivity. So you can take it straight from that advertisement. Let's look at the next one. 5.3. Briefly outline the procedure that the human resource manager must follow before the tax advisor is employed. Look at the mark allocation, 14 marks. So it's got to be quite a comprehensive answer that you're going to have to give here. You're going to have to give at least 7 facts explaining exactly what it is that the human resource manager would have to do before the job is possibly offered to whoever they ultimately decide on. Now let's look at exactly what it is that the human resource manager would have to do. Now firstly, you're obviously going to have to go into recruitment. Now from the advertisement we can see that the HR management decided to use an external source of recruitment because they have placed an advertisement. So they decided to go outside the company to recruit a suitable person to fill the vacancy. Because it appears to be quite an important position, the tax advisor is going to have to lead a whole team of people. So they went for an external source. So that's the first step. The second one, now different people are going to read the ad and they are going to reply to the ad. They are now going to apply for the job and send their CVs in. So the second step would always be to select. Now when you select, you need to go through all those CVs that you've received. And you've got to make sure that the candidates meet or comply with the requirements in the ad. For example, that they do have a BCom degree, etc. Thirdly, from that selection, you now also need to look at shortlisting people. Because you would have sifted through all the CVs and you're probably going to end up with about 10 people that you have shortlisted. These are the candidates you are most interested in as the HR manager. And those are the people you're probably now going to invite for an interview. Right, so our third step would be to go and shortlist. Next one, you may want to do a quick reference check first. But before you go and you call in the shortlisted candidates, you may want to check their references. And you may ask some questions from the referees that they have actually appointed, and also, do I actually have a BCom degree, etc. Right, the next step is going to be, so we're already on number 5 out of the 7 that we need. You are now going to call your candidates in for interviews. Right, you're going to interview those 10 people that I mentioned. Now, when you interview them, after the interview, you may also require them to perhaps do different types of tests. So that could be number 6. Now, depending on the job, the test will normally differ. It could be to try and determine the skills level of the person. So you could also do things like, will the person be able to fit in with the rest of the staff? Especially because this tax advisor is going to have to lead a whole team. So we may have to do, for example, a psychosymmetric type of testing. Some companies may ask for medical testing, right? So there can be different types of tests to test the skills level of the candidates, etc. It's to be able to see who out of those 10 shortlisted candidates is really the one that we want to give the job to. Okay, next one, number 7. After we've completed all our tests, we are now going to offer the position to the most suitable candidate. And we're now going to place that person in the position of tax advisor. We've now come to the end of the lesson. I hope you have found these tips useful and the way in which to analyze case studies and scenarios, how to go about it. Good luck for your exams and hope to see you soon.